But what you just said is completely uncontroversial. Consider everything that's gone down in the last few weeks of this year.
I'm sorry if I disappoint. Yeah. What can I say? What else do you want to talk about? I know, I'm sure some people want to hear about Netilat Lulav and Shabbat b'chutz la'aretz, right? Some people. This apparently was considered an unusual. Is the Yerushalmi? Do I have Yerushalmi there? Yeah. All right. Todah Rabba.
Okay. It doesn't count if there's not something that has.
There has to be something controversial. Rav Avi says. All right, Beseder. I'm sorry. I was remiss. We'll say something controversial.
He threw out the whole arm of this.
Just so the article doesn't follow the older sources. That's all.
All right. So why? One of the reasons I said this year that I beat less about the bush, shall we say, this year, with regards to Netilat Lulav Yom Tov Harishon Shehal Yot b'Shabbat, everywhere, Gam b'chutz la'aretz. It says in the Yerushalmi as follows, at the end of the third perek of Eruvin. Rabbi Abbahu Azar Alexandria. One year, Rabbi Abbahu, who was from Eretz Yisrael, went to Alexandria in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, which is on near the delta. He was there for Sukkot. In other words, he was in Eretz Yisrael at the time of Rosh Hashanah. He knew with certainty which day had been announced as Rosh Hashanah. And he then made his way to Mitzrayim for whatever reason. Doesn't say here why, it doesn't matter. It doesn't take more than 7-8 days to get to Egypt from Yerushalayim. Rambam says Mefurash in Yichot Chidush HaHodesh Perek Hey that it takes no more than 7-8 days. Derech Ashkelon, there was a well-known route from Yerushalayim to northern Mitzrayim. There were camel caravans. It was like taking a sherut almost. It was like a taxi. You got on, and every day there was a stop at a certain point. Everyone knew if you want to get to Mitzrayim, that's what you do. Radbaz writes in the Teshuvah that 7 days. All right, said it. And he told them to do lulav on the first day that fell on Shabbat. In other words, normally they didn't know with certainty if this first day of Sukkot was really the first day of Sukkot, or maybe it was tomorrow, because it could be that Rosh Chodesh was announced on the 30th, or only on the 31st day of Elul, which would become the first day. So he announced to them, no, I know which day was Rosh Hashanah for sure, and therefore I'm telling you today, tomorrow is Tetzua B'Chodesh Bli Safek Yom Tov Rishon, therefore do Lulav. And apparently they did so. Shama Rabbi Ameh, the Girsa here is Meshubeshet, but that's what it says, that's what it should read. Shama Rabbi Ameh. Rabbi Ameh heard about this, and he didn't like the idea. Why not? He said, Man miyabelahon Rabbi Abahu b'chol shata. Who is going to literally take Rabbi Abahu to them every year to tell them which day is definitely Yom Tov Rishon? Because it's agreed that if you don't know if today is Yom Tov Rishon, you think it is, but you're not sure. It's misafek. The misafek lo notlim b'Shabbat. But if it's vaday, you do. So he said, this year Rabbi Abahu happened to be there, but other years he's not going to be there. It's not as if someone's always there to tell them. And then it goes on to say that Rabbi Yosef sent a letter to the Jews in Alexandria telling them, Afal pi shekatavnu lachem sidrei mu'adot, al teshanu minhag avotechem nochei nefesh. So continue your usual practice of not taking the lulav on the first day, which falls on Shabbat. That's the pshat of what it says here. It follows from this that Rabbi Ameh wouldn't have had a problem with the Jews in Alexandria picking up the lulav on the first day, which falls on Shabbat, if he knew that every year there would be someone who would tell them. It wasn't. The problem is hoser yedi'ah, a lack of certainty. It's not that there was. He didn't say, wait a second, they can't possibly take lulav on the first day, because in Chutz La'aretz you don't do that. He doesn't say that. And by the way, there's no discussion here of Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot. Rabbi Abbahu did not tell them not to do a second day of Chag, Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot in Alexandria. It doesn't say such a thing. one assumes they must have done 2 days as usual. He did tell them on the first day, just like in Eretz Yisrael where they do the Lulav on the first day, because they know which day is which, they know today is Tetwa B'Chodesh, you should do the same. Rabbi Amir was concerned that this year they knew, another year they might not know. And therefore, another year, some people would assume, well, we can assume it's the first day, even though it might not be. And they would pick up the Lulav and Shabbat, and that's not correct if you don't know for sure. Yotzeh mizeh, that when the question of Lulav depends on knowing with certainty that this day is the first day of the Chag. And if that certainty exists, lichora, you can make, based on this sugya and Yerushalmi at least, I think you can say that a person should do Netilat Lulav on the first day which falls on Shabbat. It's not connected, in my view, to the question of whether there should be Yom Tov Sheni Shegaluyot, which is a separate takana, which no one has been mevatel to the present time, up to the present day. No one can at the present time. It should be done away with. Everyone knows that. Am Yisrael hasn't got its act together. When Am Yisrael gets its act together, when we have a Beit Din Gadol v'Hashuv, when we have Samuchim Beretz Yisrael who can discuss such a matter seriously, I have no doubt it will be discussed, and I wouldn't be surprised if the decision was to nullify Yom Tov Sheni Shegaluyot. Everyone knows there's no real purpose except for Minhag Avotechem B'Yedechem. The original reason, it says in the Talmud Bavli Masechet Beisa, that people should continue doing Yom Tov Sheni, Shegaluyot, and it's not talking there about Lulav, which is a mitzvah min Torah. So mevatel a mitzvah min Torah, you have to have a powerful, cogent reason. To do an extra day of Yom Tov when it's not really Yom Tov, that's not such a big deal. That's not terrible. So people, Well, it was considered. Well, first of all, that proves that what. The bracha levatara is midivrehem and not minat Torah. That's number one. That's the first thing it proves. Second of all, it's not levatara because the Chachamim said this is what you need to do for now. Why? And what was the hashash according to Talmud Bavli Masechet Beisa? The hashash was at that time the knowledge of the calendar was fresh, was new. It wasn't widely known. There weren't books on the subject. It was just beginning to be disseminated amongst wider and wider circles of people. And your common person still didn't understand how these things worked. Some of the Chachamim knew about it, something which had been kept almost entirely secret, esoteric knowledge by the Sanhedrin became more and more widely known. That's true. But it was also a time in Eretz Yisrael, you had the Byzantines. The Byzantines, that's why Bichlal the Luach HaKavua, the fixed calendar, came into existence. It wasn't because the Jews decided, let's change the system we've been using for so long, let's just have a fixed calendar. No, it's because the Byzantines, which are Romans, in other words, the Eastern Roman Empire, they decided to persecute the Jews and to basically shut down Judaism. They closed the yeshivot. That's why the Sanhedrin ceased to function around that time. And it was obvious to Rabbi Yehuda Nesi'ah, the second, that before long there would be no Beit Din that could do Kiddush HaChodesh and Ibur Shanim. So they had to announce and make known to people this fixed calendar. So this was all a response to a particular a dire situation in which they found themselves. It wasn't lechatchila, it was with the avad, but that's what had to be done. At that time, we're talking 1600 years ago or more, at that time, it wasn't obvious that as a result of the various persecutions of the Byzantines against the Jews at that time in Eretz Yisrael, it was not obvious that the knowledge of the calendar would not be lost. It wasn't a sure thing at all. Today, I would say it's impossible to imagine that how the calendar works and which day is which, that such a thing should be totally lost. I think it's almost impossible to imagine such a thing. And the fact is, it didn't happen over the last 1600 years. It never happened, even despite they didn't have internet, they didn't have books, they didn't have all sorts of things, but that knowledge was never lost. But there was a hashash that it might be lost at that time. It depends on how active the Goyim were in persecuting the Jews and destroying knowledge of such things and maybe executing Chachamim, which had happened before, who knows. So there was a real chashash. So at that time, when the question was asked, should we continue with Yom Tov Sheni? They said, yes, continue with Yom Tov Sheni. Baruch Hashem, nothing ever happened. But that was the answer then, and that will be the answer with regards to Yom Tov Sheni until it's changed. But with regards to Lulav, which is a mitzvah min Torah on the first day, b'chol makom, which, according to the Mishnah, often mefurash, in 3 separate halachot of the Mishnah, discuss being notel Lulav on Shabbat on the first day, assuming that you know it's the first day. That is vadai that's dohe Shabbat on the first day. Not allowed to carry it, obviously. L'shut harabim, you can't carry it to shul or something, but you can do it at home, or you can take it to the Beit Knesset the day before, which is discussed in the Mishnah. So these are 2 separate discussions. Whether there should be Yom Tov Sheni is one question. Whether there should be Natilat Lulav on Shabbat when there is definite knowledge, that's a separate question. And I think there was possibly a difference of opinion between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael, between the Chachamim in Bavel and the Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael with regards to this question. Whether as long as we're keeping Yom Tov Sheni, that also means ipso facto that we should not do Natilat Lulav on the first day. But as I'm pointing out, that does not necessarily follow. And this Yerushalmi in Eruvin implies that if you can be sure that people will know each year with certainty which day is the first day of Sukkot, which falls on Shabbat, they should do it. As Rabbi Abbahu said, the only hashash was that they may not know another year, and then there'll be all kinds of people who are doing different things. Yes, Eliyahu, you had a question?
I was just going to point out that during the 4th century there was a lot of back and forth, because there was another revolt, which most people are aware of, that there was another Jewish revolt, and there was a Byzantine response, and then the empire collapsed, and then Julian the Apostate took over and ordered the Jews to try and rebuild the
Oh no, the whole empire was in turmoil. That's absolutely correct. Rambam talks about this in Ilchot Chidush HaChodesh. It is known, at least somewhat.
I mean, most people think there were only two revolts.
But no, there were many. There were actually many. People forget about Mered HaTefusot and what have you. The Jews did not like the Romans, and it was entirely reciprocal. The Romans didn't like the Jews, and each had a very good reason for hating the other, because we're really like opposites, like Yisrael and Amalek. They just don't go together. It's like oil and water, they don't mix. And as soon as the Romans took over Eretz Yisrael in the year 66 BCE, Leminyan Ha'arelim, when Pompeius entered the country, they began a deliberate policy over generations of making life impossible for the Jews, raising taxes, appropriating land from Jews and giving it to non-Jews, to all kinds of Romans and Greeks and what have you. Anyone at all was good as long as they weren't Jewish. The Romans wanted to make the country less and less Jewish. If that reminds you of a certain people today, well, that occurred to you, not to me, obviously. But that was the policy.
They also, to be reciprocal, they had a fear, because Judaism was becoming very widespread throughout the rest of the Roman Empire as well. Because most Roman slave owners would allow their slaves for religious reasons. So the idea, up until then, nobody had a Shabbos. So the idea, a lot of slaves chose to become Jewish so they could say, oh, I have a religious reason, I have to not work one day in 7. And
that was not what the Romans wanted to hear.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Machon. Yeah.
Why do we not need a Bedin HaGadol to be matir lulav? I know it's been discussed before, but maybe not.
Oh, we just saw. Rabbi Abbahu teaches you that. Rabbi Abbahu was there one year in Alexandria. He said, I know the day, this is the day, to lulav.
But if later on in the Bible...
But there was never a gezerah. There's no explicit gezerah. This has to be made very clear. There was an explicit takana that there be Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot.
There was no takana not to
There was never a takana not to do lulav.
Well,
The Talmud Bavli says that we don't do it in Bavel because we don't know if it's definitely Tetuah B'Chodesh or not.
This is the word zero, though. Our text says zero, though.
Gazro, no? Gazro?
Zero Shema?
No, that doesn't fit the Mishnah. That's true. Rabbah says it. Does that fit the Mishnah? It doesn't fit the Mishnah. Does it fit the Yerushalmi Tosef? It doesn't fit.
Maybe it's a zero
And
Bavel.
this is a good. What you're asking. What you're saying is a good question.
No, he's saying
Well, whoever said it, it's a good question. I also thought of this, that these various pieces don't fit together. This Gzerah of Rabbah doesn't seem to fit with a number of other things.
Maybe Rabbah is using the term Gzerah colloquially, clearly, but it's not.
There was never a gzera. Listen what the Talmud Bavli says. The Talmud Bavli says.
Rav, can I just ask you?
Yes, sure.
The Ramban explains, as I recall, this issue of Tilkul Bereshut Rabim, that lest a person bring Lulav, like shofar.
Yes, Machon. That's true, but the fact is that gzera, which is what we're talking about, this is the gzera de Rabbah that's mentioned by the Talmud Bavli. Over here, for example, in Masechet Sukkah, the Talmud asks in Daf Mem Beth, why is Lulav not to be done on Shabbat? Or rather, why should it not be Doche Shabbat? Shabbat. Amar Rabba, Gezerah Shema Yitalenu biyado, Yalech Etzel Baki lilmod, V'yavun al ba'amot v'shut rabim. Lovely, Mitzuyan. There's only one problem with that. That this Gezerah of Rabba does not exist in the Mishnah. It's not mentioned in the Yerushalmi. It's not mentioned in any source from Eretz Yisrael. It's mentioned only in the Talmud Bavli. Why is that? I can't tell you, but that's the fact. On the other hand, we have a number of explicit Mishnayot that say the opposite. Where do we see the opposite? We see the Mishnah on Daf Mem Aleph, for example, says, Barishona haya lulav nital b'mikdash. No, I'm sorry, that's not the right Mishnah. Just a moment. First of all, we have the Mishnah here on Daf Mem Aleph with Rabbi Yosef. Yes, here it is. Here it is. Yes, Daf Mem Aleph. Yom Tov Rishon shel Har shehal liyot b'Shabbat. When the first day of Sukkot falls on Shabbat, the Mishnah states, what do people do? Kol ha'am v'olichim et lulav behem levet ha'knesset. When? Not on Shabbat. Erev Shabbat, as Rashi says, Mefurash, which is obvious. Everyone takes their lulav to the Beth Knesset. This is post-Churban. This is after the Churban. Everyone takes their lulav to the Beth Knesset on Friday, leaves it there. Each one marks it in some way or recognizes it in some way. The next day, mashkimim, they come and get up in the morning. Va'im kol ehad v'ehad makir et shelo v'notolo. Everyone recognizes their lulav and takes it, and they did netilat lulav in the Beit Knesset on the first day. The Furash in the Mishnah. That's one Mishnah. Another statement. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Yom Tov Harishon Shel Hag Shehal Yod B'Shabbat V'Shachach. If a person on the first day of Sukkot that falls on Shabbat, he forgot that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to carry it outside, and a person forgot this. Patur. He's not chayav korban hatat. Why? Because he did so with permission. What does that mean? In other words, birshut hamiswa. He did it in order to perform the miswa. His intention was to perform the miswa, which he is chayav to do today. Rashi says birshut. Shehosio birshut miswa shaya tarud b'miswa umehashev u'asuk umemaher la'asotha. So he carried it on Shabbat, which is Asur, but he was doing so b'reshut because he was supposed to take the lulav. He was just supposed to do it at home. If he hadn't taken it to the Beit Knesset, or there's no Beit Knesset where he lives, or whatever it is, he does it at home. He forgot. He took it out. He did so b'reshut hamiswa, and Rabbi Yosef says mefurash, he's patur mikorban hataf. And this is the halakha according to Rambam. Hilchot Perek Hilchot Shiragot Perek Sheni. Rambam is posek like Rabbi Yosef. That's the second. Hang on. That's the second halakha, second Mishnah, and there's a third Mishnah as well. The third Mishnah states, the beginning of Perek Revi'i, Lulav wa'arava shisha v'shiv'a. The miswa of Lulav and Arava are either done for 6 days or 7 days. It depends on what, on how many days during Sukkot you do it. Depends on what. It says as follows: Yom Tov Rishon Shehal Yod B'Shabbat Lulav Shiv'a. If the first day falls on Shabbat, then you do Lulav all 7 days of the Chag, because you do the first day as well on Shabbat. V'shal Kol Yamim. But if the first day is not V'shal Kol Yamim V'shal Kol Yamim Shisha. If Shabbat falls on let's say the third day of Sukkot, so then the first day, which was not Shabbat, you did it. The second day, not Shabbat, you did it. The third day, which is Shabbat, you don't do it because it's not minat Torah. It's only Zechel HaMikdash. So the third day you don't do it. Then the fourth and fifth day, etc., you do. So you end up doing a 6 out of 7 days, not 7 days. So we have 3 Mishnayot Mefurashot that talk about Netilat Lulav b'Shabbat. That's in the Mishnah. The Yerushalmi never heard of this Gzera of Rabbah. It's a fact that it says in the Bavli, yes, and the Rambam brings it, absolutely. But it's clear that that's not, and that's the same thing with regards to shofar.
Are we saying that
Although it's not the same thing, The Bavli uses the same rationale of Rabbah to say why you do not tokeh shofar b'Shabbat. I also think you should not be tokeh shofar b'Shabbat, but not for that reason, because the ikar miswa of shofar is only b'mikdash, as it says in the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, tokim b'mikdash avola b'medina. Yes.
But we know that in the presence of the Beit Din, that they would be tokeh.
That was a gezerah of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Hang on. The Mishnah says in Rosh Hashanah. The Mishnah says in Rosh Hashanah. I know, and V'af echad lo iskim im harif, V'af echad lo nahag karif, kolel Rambam, and with good reason, because it's very difficult to understand where the Rif could have come up with such an idea. The Mishnah says in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says, the beginning of Perek Revi'i, Yom Tov she Rosh Hashanah shehal yot b'Shabbat, b'mikdash hayu tok'im avola b'medina. That was what happened. When there was a Mikdash and Rosh Hashanah fell on Shabbat, Tekiyat Shofar was only the Mikdash, nowhere else. You can discuss if Mikdash includes the rest of Yerushalayim or not, but the rest of the country, Vadai Shelo. Mishe harabeh hamikdash yitken Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai sheyu tokim b'chol makom sheyesh bo beit din. Fine. And later, on the next daf, the Gemara, the Talmud brings the Baraitha, the Rav Sheshet brings that this is to be done only. It says here, b'beit din shekidshu et hachodesh. It has to be a beit din shekidshu et hachodesh. Ve'en kol yahid hayav litkoa. All right. So Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, Zechar HaMikdash, after the Churban, made a takana. Just as when there was a Mikdash on Shabbat, the shofar was blown in one place in the Mikdash, we should maintain this reality of having the shofar blown on Shabbat at least in one place. And where's that going to be? Where there's a Beit Din Smuchim Shekidshu et HaChodesh. How many Batei Din in Am Yisrael Makadesh Chodesh? One. You don't have 100 different Batei Din being Makadesh Chodesh. End of Al-Kazeh. Right? So in one Beit Din in the world, the central Beit Din in the whole world, which is Mekadesh Chodesh, there they blow the shofar on Shabbat. Zechel HaMikdash. Fine, that's fine. I agree with that. If we have such a place, if we have such a Beit Din, we should do that today as well. Even whether it's in Yerushalayim or in Katzrin or in Los Angeles, but we don't have that reality, so we shouldn't blow the shofar. There are those who disagree. I know, but we won't go into all of that now. There's Shita, the Tosafot, the Ra'avad, which Shani lo mekabel, neither does the Rambam, that's not the pshat of the sugya, I don't think, but okay, we said, yesh shita kazo, mi shechoshev sheyachol lakim beit din b'Yerushalayim v'litkah, yevorach.
I only raised it to hear you answer.
Okay, beseder, okay.
But by that logic, once there was Kriyat HaLuach, then there was no Beit Din Kriyat, then nobody should be blowing the shofar anywhere in the world.
No, where? On Shabbat? On Shabbat or on Yom Chol?
No, but I said there's no Beit Din.
No, but that's only on Shabbat.
It's only if it's on Shabbat.
For Shabbat. Okay. When it's Yom Chol, what's the problem? When what's Yom Chol? Yom Tov. Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah shelo hal b'Shabbat. What's the problem? We're talking about Shabbat.
And that's why we're saying that therefore nowhere in the world.
On Shabbat.
Because there's no because there's no.
En lanu bedin shesmuchim. Rambam says it has to be bedin shesmuchim shekidshu et hachodesh. We don't have such a thing.
What I'm saying is even if we have a Beit Din Samuch Chashav, they're not going to be Mekadesh Chodesh unless they decide to get away with doing.
If they were to Mekadesh the Chodesh, we introduced that whole system. Then yes, it could be done.
But that's multiple steps then.
You're right. There's a number of steps.
It's not enough then to have a Beit Din to just set up a Beit Din and say now.
We can all agree, I think, that there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of work to be done. Yes.
The whole point of the Beit Din was the Kibbur Diyach, like the Mekadesh Chodesh. So if we have a Luach Kavua, isn't that as if we have a...
That's what we just discussed.
That's what I just said.
Nachon. No, but
No.
We would have to reintroduce the whole system of Kiddush HaChodesh Apia Re'iyah. I also think that in the future, when there is Kiddush HaChodesh Apia Re'iyah, it will be possible technologically to announce the entire world when the Beit Din was Mekadesh HaChodesh. Even on Yom Tov, it will be possible to do it in an electronic, digital fashion. It can be done al yedei Nochri, it can be done al yedei Grama, it could be done all kinds of matters. It would appear on the screen in every shul that Beit Din Kiddush HaChodesh, and everyone would know. It wouldn't be a big problem. That used to be done also in a very immediate way before the Kuthim, the Shomronim, began causing trouble. As the Mishnah says in Rosh Hashanah, they used to announce Motzei Rosh Hashanah, they would announce, or Rosh Chodesh, they would announce by way of Meduroth, by way of bonfires on certain mountaintops, which is visible instantaneously, essentially, and within a couple of hours they would know in Bavel what had happened, if that day was Rosh Chodesh or not.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.